Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, current senior deacon of Fort Worth 148, and we have a special guest today.
That's Michael Paul, past master of Shavantes number 5 and long time ago, Friends of Harmony number 58.
Yes, and that's in the beautiful state of Louisiana, correct?
Correct.
There we go.
So it's a pleasure to talk to you, Michael.
Same here.
For sure. Absolutely. I love it that we can connect through the interwebs and get a podcast knocked out with a brother in Louisiana. We are waiting on Billy. I think he's going to join us here in a minute, but him and Gabe, the Masons they are at commandery practice.
Yes.
They do masonry.
And
5 nights a
unfortunately,
week.
Billy had to drop me off at my house. Being the good man that he is, he had to drop me off at my house because I could not get into my parking garage downtown because as of this recording time, this is March 13th? Yeah, March 13th.
Yeah.
It is raining glass in downtown Fort Worth because we have had 60-mile-per-hour winds. And it turns out that when you have, faster than that. Turns out that when you have 60-plus mile-per-hour winds in a city that is filled with glass buildings, some of the buildings, older and newer, may sometimes decide to divest themselves of their windows. And when the window comes down, it explodes. So, yeah, I even got hit by a piece of falling glass. Don't worry, it was small, but I can lay that claim to fame. So, yeah.
You're wounded from the storms. There was some wicked storms, though, man.
It was wild. Pray for Fort Worth, y'all, I guess. I don't know.
We'll manage.
So as you listeners may have guessed, today is a Fraternal Spotlight episode with Brother Michael Pohl. Before diving into the meat of the subject, we're going to have a quick question that is probably easy to answer. This discussion question was posted by the user Independent Property on the Freemasonry subreddit. And the question is very simple. Is it true that if a cop pulled you over and you are both Freemasons, that the cop will look the other way? Rhit, what do you think?
Wait, is this a clandestine Mason cop or is this a real cop?
Let's assume that this is a real cop and not some sort of clandestine Masonic police out of California.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Listeners, if you haven't heard of it, Google clandestine Masonic police California. It's a wild ride. But you and the cop are both regular Freemasons.
Yeah, don't even expect that. Don't ask for it. That if I'm a police officer and a brother says, "Hey, I'm a brother, don't give me a ticket," I'm more than likely going to give you a ticket if you're doing something stupid.
Absolutely.
I'd be offended by that.
Mm-hmm. If anything, that cements the fact that you're going to get a ticket. Hey, man, we're on the square here. Oh, really?
Yeah, you just got pulled over for 80 and a 40 or something.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Being on the square means being honest. Surprise. There were a couple of great answers in there. One of them said that, hey, I'm a brother, and the police chief here is a brother, and we all work for him. And even the non-Masons know that if they go easy on a Mason because the police chief is a Mason, that he's going to give them hell, right? And so it just doesn't work that way, y'all. Part of Freemasonry is honesty, and hey, if it's something that is worth only a verbal warning, you're absolutely just going to get a verbal warning because that's what's fair, right? And if anything, the police officer in question may give you a little bit more of a tongue lashing because of your brother. You're held to a higher standard. So,
yes. That's the whole key to the thing.
Now, one thing I do remember doing when I lived in Louisiana, because I did live there for a brief stint, is that I always made sure that my sticker saying that I donated to the local police association was prominently displayed in my windshield, because
Smart man.
that got a lot of mileage.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
I'm not going to comment on any of this.
You're smart, Mike.
yeah. Well, so now that we've got the very brief discussion question out of the way, let's let's start this fraternal spotlight with Brother Michael Pohl. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the Masonic lens?
Well, I'm a book publisher. I publish Masonic books, but I also publish a number of other type of books. And prior to that, I worked in TV for about 20 years as a technician. And prior to that, worked in printing. So it all kind of gelled together into book publishing, whatever reason.
So what was the most fun or maybe the most popular thing you worked on TV?
I worked at WDSU in New Orleans, and that was about 8 years I was there. They did several movies that they'd come in, and I enjoyed down eating a free steak, and they were good. We used to do the Jerry Lewis telethon, and that was not fun because you'd work quite a number of hours straight through, 24 hours straight through, and then they give you the next few days off, and so it didn't really pay off that well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was creative. I'll give it that. That was what I liked about when we did things that were creative. When you had to edit things or do anything that fueled the creative juices.
So, back to Masonry. When did you join, and how old were you?
I joined when I was 21 in 1975. I joined Friends of Harmony number 58, and went through the chairs. I was very young when I went through. I served the first term as master in 1980, and the second term in 1990. And unfortunately, the lodge went dark sometime after that, and I belong to several other lodges in New Orleans area now, as well as one in Washington, D.C.
What is it that inspired you to join?
I remember my grandfather was a Mason, and I was about 12 when he died, and he had a Masonic funeral, and I saw the procession, and that very much impressed me. And growing up, I remembered, I pretty much idolized him as a young boy, not realizing the Masonic connection. And when I told later that he was a Mason, I said, I'd like to see what that is. And that was what really inspired me to join.
So you were 21. Was that like 21st birthday kind of thing? You were ready to go, or
yes,
it just happened to be?
No, I was 21. I was waiting, and I submitted my petition the day after my 21st birthday.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's kind of a testament to how powerful those funerals can be. You were 12 when you saw that?
I was 12.
So 9 years you carried that with you. That's unbelievable. Yes. That's awesome.
So a lot of times, at least in my experience, the procession is automobile based, and we have the services at the graveside. Was this a walking procession?
Well, it was in New Orleans Cemetery, so it was a walking procession outside into the cemetery. So it came. I mean, they must have been 20, 30 members there, and maybe more. But they were all big, long procession, and that's what inspired me. And coincidentally, a couple of nights ago, I was talking with somebody, and they said that they can't get lodges to do funerals anymore. That
Hmm.
they have to get one of the district lodges as such that to do it for lodges. And I just thought that that's an unfortunate loss, because I know how it affected me when it was done, and they clearly did it right. And it's just we should do these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, because you hear everybody say, we need to get in our community more. And as unfortunate as it is, we have brothers dying all the time. And it's our duty to bury them. And what a powerful way to get into the community. Because, you know, after my grandfather's, I know there was a lot of talk about it and how awesome it was. It's something very powerful, but that's not uncommon, Mike. That's something that I would dare say a lot of jurisdictions suffer from, because I know we do here.
One of the conversations I had with my wife, you know, now that we're married and we're starting to, we've already been talking about funeral planning and things like that because we're both young, but we know we need to have everything in place. But we're starting to formalize stuff now that we're married, and we were talking about Masonic funerals, and it kind of struck me when we were sitting there in the car talking about um, funerals, because I was talking about, hey, when I get home, please remind me to iron my shirt, because tomorrow is the funeral of the Secretary General Emeritus of Fort Worth Scottish Rite, and the end conclusion of the conversation was kind of, hey, this might actually be the most important thing that we do as Masons. I don't know if it's the most important thing, but this week it feels like the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would dare say that could flip flop in between making Masons and burying Masons. Which is the most important? It would, I guess, just depend on what you've done last.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, because those are two of our. I mean, one without the other, it just doesn't really work.
Yeah. Michael, was there something that drew you specifically to your Mother Lodge?
He was a member of it. My grandfather was a member. He was a past master. He was master in 1945, and
Wow.
that's why I wanted to join that lodge. And that's what drew me there.
That's
And
cool.
I yeah, it was the greatest honor when I became master of that lodge, because I knew he had been master of that lodge.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh, that's something. Yeah, coming full circle from a funeral.
Yeah. I had people in the lodge, older members, would tell me stories about him. They knew him, and like I said, I was 12, but they knew him and remembered him and would tell me stories that I had no idea about. It just made everything that much more interesting and
Oh,
meaningful.
yeah, for sure.
So you got to know your grandfather then also through the lens of your lodge brothers. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second view.
Yeah, for real.
And I got to say, every time there's so many guests that we interview on the podcast where we ask, "Hey, what inspired you to join Freemasonry?" And the answer is always, "No, yeah." Look, it's not always, but it's often my father, my grandfather, my uncle, my older brother, whatever. And that's I'm really jealous because, or I guess envious, because I'm the first one in my family, and I actually inspired my uncle to join. you know, and but I have no predecessor, so I always look at this as kind of like there's a wistful sensation. Um,
Yeah.
so Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your mother lodge and your home lodge?
Well, Mother Lodge was Friends of Harmony 58, and it was organized by someone. The first worshipful master and the guy who organized it was somebody that Texas Masons knows, John Holland, and
Mm.
he was the first worshipful master, and I served as master of that lodge in 80 and 90, and it was at that time the oldest English-speaking lodge in Louisiana. It was chartered in 1847 or 8, somewhere around like that.
That's an
Goodness.
interesting qualification. I like that. The oldest English-speaking lodge.
Yeah.
I
Right.
love that.
At that time, there were a couple of older English-speaking lodges, but they had ceased to exist.
Yeah.
And
So when did that lodge go dark?
About 1997, 98.
97,
They went
98.
dark, and I joined Germania 46, and that was one of the Scottish Rite lodges in New Orleans. And then from there, I joined Etoile Polaire and Perfect Union and Cervantes. Between that time, I joined Hiram Tacoma number 10 in Washington, D.C. So I'm a plural member all over the place.
Wow.
Gotcha. Which, I mean, are you active in all of those, or do you have one that you regularly attend?
Well, I've been, they hit me with a stick and made me become worshipful master of Cervantes last year. And they got a bigger stick and made me secretary this
Oh,
year.
you poor man.
But it's the way it was. But I should be retiring as secretary this year because someone will be taking over. And I've enjoyed all of them as often as I can.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, are there any other offices that you held? I mean, I'm assuming you went through the warden's chairs. Did you start at steward and go all the way up, or?
I started as junior deacon, and I became senior deacon. At that time, it was winding down. Prior to that, now we have what's known as certificate of proficiency, proving that you know the ritual. I had obtained that when I was senior deacon, so they progressed me through the chairs, and I served junior warden, senior warden, master, and then I became the lodge lecturer, which was the instructor for the work. And then in the mid 80s until 90, I was a district grand lecturer. And then I served on several committees and such.
What does what does a district grand lecturer do?
Well, they're responsible for the work in the district. We had, for a good many years, there were 2 grand lecturers. And the feeling was that they weren't able to get around in the all the lodges enough, and they were getting up in age, and they felt that they wanted to reorganize things. And so instead of 2 grand lecturers, they made 19 grand lecturers, 1 for each district.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's where.
Okay,
So
so
kinda
in
like-
Texas, our equivalent is the DI, the district instructor. Hey,
Yeah,
Billy.
we call them instructors.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, that was Billy. I heard. I thought that was the ghost of Billy.
No, I was going to ask the same thing. It sounds like that is the equivalent of our district instructors that we have here in Texas.
Yeah, so that's for we have like 151 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So, as far as overall masonry, and I guess we could talk, maybe from your experience there, but overall throughout the United States, what do you see as its weaknesses and strengths?
Well, I see Freemasonry as having something of a dual nature. I see us as the organization, and the organization, we can improve that or we can mess it up. And the philosophy, we can't really touch that. That's set, and that's what is kind of like our goal to work with. And I see the weakness in masonry as the human factor. When we get in the organization and ego gets in, and we start thinking more of ourselves than for the lodge or the grand lodge or Freemasonry in general, and it causes us to deviate away from the philosophy. And when we get far enough philosophy, that's where we start plummeting down. And no matter how we try to pass it off, we're sinking down and down. And I think that Masonry had been sinking down for a number of years until people started realizing, hey, we're missing something. We need the education aspect. And I think that that's where we started turning around. And the strength was recognition that we have the philosophy, learn it and see what it is and improve ourselves. And that's basically my opinion of it.
No, I love that. That's very powerful because the human aspect, that's perfect. That is our weakness. But yet, if we study the philosophy, that weakness can become a strength if you can tuck that ego away, because that's so true. Whether it's somebody seeking a title or they let a little power go to their head because they're called worshipful master or whatever, can be devastating.
Well, the whole point of Masonry, we say we take somebody who's good and make them better. So if
Hmm.
we do that, then that's going to improve the organization. And
Yeah.
that will be through the philosophy. And so it turns, like you say, it turns of the human aspect into a strength.
Yes. I'm stealing that, Mike.
I was having a conversation with somebody recently about revitalizing certain bodies, and one of the lines that was uttered in the conversation was, "Can you imagine how cool it would be if we actually did what we say we do?"
It's the truth. It's struggle's real, huh?
Sure.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, the next question was about how we improve the weakness, but I think you kind of hit on that with education and study of that philosophy.
Oh, yeah, we have to educate our members, and I was talking with someone saying that, uh, the most in Louisiana, the district grand lecturers, they are required to stand an examination to prove that they are qualified to hold their title, but no one else, no other officer in the lodge or grand lodge is required to stand any sort of examination regarding the work or their understanding of Masonic law. We need to start holding people to higher standards, and that could turn things around.
Yes.
Well, and especially when it comes to the administrative aspects of a grand body. I mean, if you can't answer questions about jurisprudence or correct decisions to make within trial scenarios, so to speak, why are you here?
Hmm.
So,
And there's a big difference between civil trials and Masonic trials. That's a whole two different animals completely.
it's interesting that the district lecturers would have to stand like a proficiency test. I know here in Texas, there's been several different proposals to have, even regular lodge officers have some kind of proficiency test in standardize that in some way, but there's always been resistance to it.
Yeah. Well, we do, to be fair, we do have the officers have to be approved, but it's by their lodge brothers.
Right.
So they have to show proficiency in opening and closing in their position. Um, I think they have to know all of them, actually, and then the lodge approves that, just like the proficiency. Which, you know, if we, like Gabe said, if we did what we're supposed to and held each other accountable, we wouldn't have to worry about Grand Lodge doing that.
What a radical
Right.
concept.
Yeah, I mean, because originally that's kind of why we even voted those guys in there. But it got to the point kind of to where it's like, holy cow, the doors are going to shut if we don't put somebody in here. So it was like, who can fog the mirror, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because I mean, otherwise, lodges would have collapsed. But it's certainly made its toll. And it's time to get the cavalry and change it.
Right.
Michael, what would you say is your favorite aspect of Masonry and why?
I would have to say studying the philosophy of it. I enjoy that. I enjoy reading any book on Masonic philosophy. I enjoy discussing it with Masons. I enjoy seeing the philosophy in the ritual, and any aspect of the philosophy that we can lift ourselves up, that really impresses me.
There you go. Working on that, Ashler. So I think we'll jump into the next topic, which we've got labeled as Louisiana Masonry. And first question I've got here is, what is the name of the oldest lodge in Louisiana, and when was it chartered?
Well, the first lodge that we know of, and I got to start with, there's a lot of the early history of Louisiana Masonry that's just missing and unknown. But the first lodge I know of was Perfect Harmony. That was in 1752. The two oldest lodges now are Perfect Union, which is 17. I'm trying to remember 1793, and I think it was 1793, and Etwa Polea 7, and those are both still existing right now. And there were 5 lodges that created the Grand Lodge. Only 3 of them are existing. That was Etwa Polea, Perfect Union, and Perseverance, number 4. So those are the only 3 from the original 5 that created the Grand Lodge that are still in existence.
Wow. So that's almost 100 years of Masonry before Texas got their stuff together.
Well, you got to realize it was because the port of New Orleans, that was a major thoroughfare from the United States of what was the colonies, and through all the Caribbean and such. So it was a natural place where they would come.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So you come in that port instead of sailing on in.
Yeah.
So where did the lodges before the Grand Lodges, or before the Grand Lodge was chartered, where did they get their charter from?
Each of the lodges had several charters before the Grand Lodge started. They came from France, mostly Caribbean islands, but there was, we can't prove this, but it seems to be what the idea was. All of them ended up having charters or obtaining charters from Grand Lodges in the United States, and that was mainly in South Carolina. And I believe they got rid of their charters from outside the U.S. because they wanted to be part of the U.S. community, even though they were French in nature, French speaking, and rituals. Everything were the French rituals that were being still wanted to be part of the United States. And Grand Lodge was created in 1812, the same year that Louisiana got statehood. So they wanted to prove themselves, I think.
Yeah, kind of assimilate, with the culture, I guess.
So then, in a nutshell, these lodges had non-American charters, and then divested themselves of those non-American charters in favor of new American charters.
Correct.
Okay.
Like I said, it was. There's nothing written down that says that, but the only reason why they would have done it, and the interesting aspect is that Etwa Polea, the original numbering, Etwa Polea was listed as number 5 of the 5 lodges that started it, but Etwa Polea was the second oldest lodge, and the only reason that we can think as to why Etwa Polea was originally number 5 was because it didn't want to let go of its non-U.S. charter. And it finally, by the time it did, it ended up being number 5. It was the Jungian charter of that group. I think that's why they listed them like that.
Interesting. So when does Grand Lodge Louisiana hold their annual communications?
That switched recently. They now hold it in June. This coming June, end of June, will be the Grand Lodge session. They used to always be in February, and some reason they changed that, and so now it's going to be at the end of June this year.
Oh, when it's nice and warm.
Yes. As opposed to the nasty, cold, rainy weather.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I know the Grand Lodge of Louisiana is unique in this aspect. You guys do have two options for degrees, right?
Currently, yes. You can join either York Rite Lodge, which is the American Web Ritual, like pretty much like everyone else works in the country, or we also have Scottish Rite Craft Lodges, which is the first 3 degrees of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. In every valley outside New Orleans area, basically, when you join, you receive the first degree you receive is the fourth. Well, these are the craft degrees that you don't get, and makes a complete system in the New Orleans.
Gotcha. So like how Gabe tells me that York Rite completes our story that we have. If you go through those degrees, the Scottish Rite completes that story.
Correct. If you, I'm not going to get into ritual, but
Yeah.
when you join the 4th degree in the Scottish Rite, you'll notice a storyline jump or a disconnect from the Craft Lodge 3rd degree and the Scottish Rite 4th degree. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Well, there is no difference in the Scottish Rite Craft Lodge. It flows seamlessly because it's the same rite. And one disclaimer, there's been a lot of interest in the Scottish Rite Craft Lodges, and I've had people contact me and say, well, we want to have a Scottish Rite Lodge in our jurisdiction, and our SGIG said it was okay and not the way to do it. The New Orleans Craft Lodges are under the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, and the SGIG has nothing whatsoever to do, and the valleys have nothing whatsoever to do with the 16th district, and the Supreme Council has nothing to do with the 16th district. And so you got to get your Grand Master to talk to our Grand Master, and you could work it that way, but not the SGIG to SGIG. You just end up getting them in trouble with their Supreme Council. So that doesn't work well.
Yeah, you saying that made me kind of laugh because I was like, oh no, there's no way that would work.
Yeah.
No. But I've had people tell me that, and they've gotten their SGIGs involved. And I said, you could get them in trouble. It's not the way to do this. It's through Grand Lodge to Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
Scottish Rite from the 4th to 33rd has nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
It's different jurisdictions, that's all.
Yeah.
Basically, the only time that you get the SGIG involved is when you tell him, hey, look, we did this cool thing, and the Grand Master said it was okay.
Yeah, most Grand Lodges are pretty specific on what rituals and how.
And I was talking with another brother who has done a little bit of jurisprudence work for the Supreme Council, and he said basically the only time that the Supreme Council has any say in the craft degrees is when there is no regular Grand Lodge in existence in that jurisdiction that they are operating. But where are you going to find a valley that is operating in a jurisdiction that does not have a regular Grand Lodge?
Yeah.
So it's just like the most theoretical of theoreticals, basically.
Well, technically, and this is where you say currently. Technically, the New Orleans Valley was previously, until the early 1970s, 72, 73, something like that, it was the Grand Consistory of Louisiana, and it was under the jurisdiction of quite a few councils throughout its history. It was created in 1811, but in the 1830s, it passed under, for a time, the Charleston Supreme Council, which is the southern jurisdiction. But that was right before the time where all the Supreme Councils went dark. And so they were trying to get communication, and there was nobody there to answer. And so the New Orleans consistory chartered several Scottish Rite craft lodges under their jurisdiction while it was under the southern jurisdiction. Now, there's no evidence that the Supreme Council knew anything about it because they couldn't get in contact with them. But that spurred a concordat between the Grand Consistory and the Grand Lodges. Lodge says, no, you can't charter craft lodges, but what we will do is we will provide for them, and that's where the Grand Lodge officially recognized York Rite lodges, Scottish Rite lodges, and French Rite lodges, because there were 3 of them at that time. And they had a complicated system, what they call a Chamber of Rites, where they could supervise each of the rituals. And that all came from actually the southern jurisdiction, or the Grand Consistory under the southern jurisdiction in New Orleans. There was 2 lodges that they chartered. So it's an interesting contradiction to the way things are done now.
Gotcha.
Now you mentioned that there were York Rite or Preston Webb lodges, Scottish Rite lodges, and French Rite lodges. Now, I know that in present day, the 16th District of New Orleans is Scottish Rite. Is there a legal provision, like there is for the Scottish Rite, to allow for French Rite lodges?
No. And the reason was that they, and yet, I'll explain that in a second. In 1850, it was basically a civil war in New Orleans Masonry. And they they wanted to do away with all non-York Rite lodges, all non-English speaking lodges. And so what happened was they ended up causing a break, which almost destroyed and in the time that passed after that, they tried to reach an agreement between each other, a settlement. And so they said, well, okay, we'll allow the Scottish Rite lodges. But by that time, the French Rite lodges had already left. And so they didn't exist on a formal level. And they only would recognize the Scottish Rite lodges. The problem is we're discovering more and more examples of the French Rite influence in what we believe is the Scottish Rite lodges. There's 10 of them. And Lodge does this, and that's really more French Rite than Scottish Rite. So we're discovering the influence of all 3 rites in a number of the lodges.
So actually, and I do have a question. Wasn't there another rite that existed in the early 1800s as well, under Carnot?
Well, Cerno. Well,
Yeah,
that's Scottish Rite. That's
okay.
also Scottish Rite, but that's a whole. That's not a different rite. There was another rite. Early days, it was the parent rite of both the Scottish Rite and the French Rite, which is the Order of the Royal Secret, or the Rite of Perfection. We had lodges working in that ritual, and we discovered a ritual at Tulane University, is the Monseigneur rituals, it became known as, and it was probably the original ritual that was used by the 5 early lodges of the Grand Lodge, and most likely the Grand Lodge itself, because it was the ritual they had then that was French language. But the Cerno Rite is a different animal, and that's a whole different. Really, you'd need a podcast just for the Cerno Rite, because that's how complicated it is.
Interesting. So if a person like me that's used to the York Rite side of the craft degrees, are the Scottish Rite craft degrees going to be recognizable or just completely different?
They're going to have, you will recognize that there's a common thread that runs through all Masonic degrees or rituals. that no matter what they are, but you come in and if you have never seen, for example, an apprentice degree, and you come into any of the Scottish Rite Lodge, and you see an apprentice degree, you go, wow. And it's far more theatrical, far more esoteric, and symbolic in nature. It's more of a surprise, I'll say.
Gotcha. Do you know when those rituals came into play? Was that an Albert Pike creation?
No, that was way before Albert Pike was born. They were doing that. So it's the earliest lodge that we can confirm with Scottish Rite was a lodge that was created in 1807 under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Council of Kingston, Jamaica, and that was actually the body that created and initially chartered the Grand Consistory of Louisiana, which is today the Valley of New Orleans. So we know that this lodge in 1807. Now today, for example, Etoile Polaire works the Scottish Rite ritual. Perfect Union works the York. We know that neither one of these lodges could have worked either of those rituals when they began, because neither the York Rite ritual as we have it or the Scottish Rite ritual existed when they were started. So they had to work this old Rite of Perfection ritual, was probably the one. But yeah, you'd recognize a lot of differences, and it's a variety that I think is very beneficial. Because you can see one ritual and you can go to another lodge and you can see a different ritual and you can compare the two.
Yeah.
And it's nothing plus.
It would be interesting. I'm going to have to make that happen. So if there is a Mason that's going to travel to Louisiana and kind of do a Masonic walkabout, is there a must-see Masonic place in Louisiana that they should make sure they go to?
In New Orleans, there's Etoile Polaire on Rampart Street, and then there's Germania Hall on Bienville, and a little towards the end of Bienville, there's a Masonic cemetery. But really, any of the cemeteries in New Orleans has Masonic tombs, and if you haven't seen the New Orleans cemeteries, that's amazing thing in itself, because these people in the late 1800s, early mid 1800s, their tomb, many times they are more expensive than somebody's house today. They really did some elaborate tombs that they had architects that would design these, that they would commission them, extremely elaborate above ground tombs. And a lot of them, one of them is almost, it was a past Grand Master of Louisiana. It's almost like a mini lodge hall he set up there.
Yeah. No, I can definitely, the cemeteries are a unique experience.
Yeah, I would recommend, Etoile Polaire, Germania Hall, which has a number of lodges meeting in it, and the Masonic Cemetery.
There you go, folks. Buy your tickets now. So I think that'll segue us into our next subject, which we've got Texas Masonry gets its start. And I think most Texas Masons know that, we received our first charter from Louisiana. Our first lodge, Holland Lodge, is named after John Holland, which was a Louisiana Mason. But could you kind of give us a lowdown on who that guy was?
John Holland, we can't find, we know he was originally from Pennsylvania, and he moved down to New Orleans at a young age, and not sure if he was a Mason in Pennsylvania or New Orleans, but he became a worshipful master of Etoile Polaire Lodge, which is Scottish Rite Lodge, and he served the Grand Lodge of Louisiana as Grand Master than anyone else. It was 12 times he served it officially, and he was Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Consistory of Louisiana, and he was really a character. He was a strong force. He was started out as a jailer, and he became a deputy sheriff, then sheriff of New Orleans, and then became an attorney in his later years. And he was a prominent figure. He was very much in Louisiana Masonry.
Yeah, to serve Grand Master 12 times, that's somebody liked him. That's for sure. That's cool. So another interesting character that when I was researching was John Allen, was a Louisiana Mason who delivered the charter to Anson Jones for Holland Lodge. Do you know anything about that guy?
I know very little about the man, but his selection was very interesting because the lodge he belonged to was Louisiana 32. And earlier I mentioned that Friends of Harmony was the oldest English-speaking lodge. Well, Louisiana 32 was a English-speaking lodge prior to Friends of Harmony. But when the Grand Lodge was created, there were 5 French-speaking lodges that created it, but there were 7 lodges that were invited to consider creating a Grand Lodge. 2 of those lodges were speaking, and they withdrew. Louisiana 30 was a reestablishment of Louisiana, which was one of the English-speaking lodges that ceased to exist. And it's part of the problems were the Masons did not want to have non-English speaking lodges under the Grand Lodge of Louisiana. They wanted all lodges to be English speaking and Yorkite ritual. The selection of John Allen by John Holland I find is very interesting because it seemed like he was trying to appease or make nice the English-speaking Masons, and he sent them probably because he knew Texas was more English-speaking. And I find it a very interesting choice. It adds to the complexity of John Holland, why he would send someone from one of the English-speaking lodges. And that lodge only lasted maybe 10, 15 years after that time. It died out usually probably around the 1840s or so. So it was an interesting choice.
Yeah. It's all those little things have stories that just once you start unraveling it,
Right.
It's a never-ending task. It's so interesting. So last question I got on this topic, and I'll let Gabe or Billy take us into the next one. How big was Freemasonry in 1835 when Texas was getting its start?
It was a lot smaller than it is now. It was mainly centered in New Orleans, but they had lodges in other areas of Louisiana. But in a particular lodge, if you got 20, 30 members, that was a big lodge. So it wasn't anywhere near the powerhouses that they are now or the big machines that they are now. It was much smaller, and it was not uncommon for a worshipful master of a lodge to serve 10, 15 years. They would often take a position and they would be the worshipful master for quite a number of years. And it helped stability with the lodges, I believe.
So it's like being secretary now.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
It's too painful.
I'm getting out in 7 years, so hopefully anyway.
Or so you think.
Yeah.
So Michael, why did you join the Scottish Rite?
I joined the Scottish Rite. I waited a couple. When I joined, there was a requirement by the Grand Lodge. You either had to stand your Master Mason exam or wait 6 months before you could join the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. And I stood my Master Mason's exam, but then I didn't want to I wanted to learn more of the craft lodge before I joined anything else. And so I joined Mason in 75. I waited to 78 to join the Scottish Rite. And I regretted waiting because it just blew me away. The philosophy of the degrees in the Scottish Rite it was truly like I was coming home to something. It was the lessons of integrity, honor, responsibility, justice, all of these subjects. And it wasn't just the degrees. At that time, they had stopped, but they gave Clausen's commentaries on morals and dogma. And I just devoured the book. And I went through and I wanted to study as much of this as possible. And every time I dig into it, it was a new venture. And the truth of the matter is, I've been in over 40 years. There's not a day goes by that I don't try to research something about the Scottish Rite, and constantly finding new things, whether it's in the philosophy or the history aspect. And it was the best thing I ever did was joining it, to be honest.
I think that kind of shows with how you've dug into it so much. So, what do you enjoy most? Is it the philosophy of the Scottish Rite?
Yes, without question. It's the hidden lessons, and it's the layered lessons. When you think you got an answer to something, all of a sudden you find it a little more hidden down there, and so it compels you to keep digging more and more about it. It doesn't end and it doesn't get boring. And anyone
Yeah.
who says that they found everything about the Scottish Rite, either in the philosophy or the history, they really don't know what they're talking about. Really.
I know. I just recently had one of those moments to where there was some symbolism. This was in the craft, or Blue Lodge. It was hiding right before my face, and it was through a discussion at the Scottish Rite that it was like, "Holy Toledo! How have I missed this for 14 years?" So you just revisit those symbols, and they just keep opening up to you. It's
Mhm.
really interesting how that works.
Yeah, one of the things that I remembered when I was going through the Scottish Rite degrees during the reunion at the Fort Worth Valley was this repeated emphasis that, oh yes, everything that we're talking about is just a further development of things that are found in the craft degrees. You don't need anything more than the craft degrees. We're just exploring something, that's already there, just in a different light. And that may be true, but if it is, I don't really see it. And there are so many angles that you would never see in the craft lodge that you would only see in Scottish Rite. I mean, it's wild. It's wild.
When I was doing the presentation on the 29 virtues from the 20th degree, I think it is, Master of the Masonic Lodge,
9 virtues?
29 virtues.
29 virtues.
Yeah. So you can see how the 20 virtues that apply to the material, they line up with temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. And then the 9 virtues that deal with the spiritual, they all line up with some form of faith, hope, and charity. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that it unpacks Masonry a little bit and makes it a little bit more palatable, to understand those lessons. Because
Right.
it's jammed into the Blue Lodge to where it's hard to unpack it all.
Mm.
You could do it. You could do it. I'm sure, but smarter than me.
Well, and so I had a similar experience when I had to present the ladder of perfection talk for the 4th degree. And that as I was going through it, right, because that's right off the bat, it starts mentioning Kabbalah, how it's used throughout Scottish Rite, and you can look back and there's even evidence of it in the first 3 rites, and it's there. But until we're armed with the knowledge to recognize it, it's like we can't even see it until it's pointed out.
Mm, the lips of wisdom start whispering.
So, Michael, there is an organization that you're heavily involved with called the New Orleans Scottish Rite College. Can you tell us more about the New Orleans Scottish Rite College and how it came about?
Yes, I now this is not the New Orleans Scottish Rite College is not affiliated with the Valley of New Orleans or any Masonic body. I just created that on my own, and it was designed to. I saw too many times where people were going through degrees and they were a 32nd Mason and many times 33rd degree Masons, and they had absolutely no clue any aspect of the Scottish Rite, and it evolved into teaching more of the craft lodge. And so I wanted to create a platform, and I didn't know YouTube that well, so I got my two, and one of them is doing the editing, and I just stand in front of my computer or sit in front of my computer, and this aspects of trying to bring more education to Masons and make Masons realize that whether it's the Scottish Rite Valley or York Rite chapter, whatever, they can. There's so much more than what they might be believing is there, and that was the hope and intent of trying to help out a little bit.
So, what's the name of your YouTube channel? Is it New Orleans Scottish Rite College?
New Orleans Scottish Rite, right? New Orleans Scottish Rite College.
So that's where you go find him. And there's more videos you can watch in a year on that thing right now.
Well, I've been doing it for, I'm trying to remember. I got it together 2013, and we started formulating, but it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I actually started doing the videos with it. We were trying to do lectures and such through that.
Yeah, okay.
And it was more of rather than a YouTube channel initially.
Mm-hmm. You know, that kind of sparks an idea a little bit off topic, but I wonder, when you say you were doing lectures, were you recording them and then posting them?
No, that would have required some intelligence on my part. I didn't do that. I just did the lectures.
Oh, okay. Got you. Just set up and did a lecture.
Yeah.
It wasn't interactive though, because I think I've seen that actually. But that would be interesting. Do an online interactive, kind of round table or lecture.
Yes. If I knew how to do that, I would probably do it.
I may have to look into that, because what would be interesting too is because you may even do a subscription. If you want to watch this, you pay $5 and come on and ask the expert questions. That could be a way to take up the production on something like that. Gears are turning. So, do you know about how many subscribers you have now?
I have over 2,500, and that's compared when I first started and I had 10. I thought that 10 incredible, but then I learned that they have many of them that have millions of subscribers. So I realized I just take everything in a stride, and I'm glad when people watch it. If it helps anybody, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's actually watch every time it comes out. I notice when a new one comes out, I'll see some clicks going quick, and initially it's comments, then it tapers off a little bit.
Yeah.
And, I think a term thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and those things I think are just kind of getting their win, because I mean, any kind of medium like this, there was a want and a drive for it, but I think that's just now getting to where guys are going to it for an actual resource.
Yes. Well, the best thing that best reward I could get is when someone writes me and says, because something you wrote or something I watched, I joined the Masons or I joined Scottish Rite. That's when I know that I'm what I'm doing.
There you go. So that was kind of my next question: is what are some positive outcomes? But I guess that's happened a few times where
That's it. Yeah.
that's definitely. I mean, that's what we're doing. I mean, because think about it. Even if you got 10 guys to join, but if there were other men out there doing similar things, because that's living masonry in our community, uh, the membership thing would take care of itself. Because I don't like to call it a problem. It's a thing.
Yeah. Well, I know for a fact that most Masons don't comment on anything that they watch or they read, but they have their own opinions, and you learn later on whether or not it was successful by if it keeps going, you
Mhm.
know. But you most of them.
Yeah. So to kind of flip that question, what are some of the obstacles or negative aspects you've had, and how'd you overcome them?
Well, I get what I do is people can comment on all of the videos, but I have to approve them. This is that I approve them because I started getting a lot of really wacky anti-Masonic comments, and it's almost sad or comical. Gotten some of those. There's also some Masons who are Masons, probably in name only, and they who told you you can authorize to do this? You're not we didn't tell you that you could do this. And it's usually guys or mid-level somebody, and they used to be this or they used to be that, and it's just, you know, everything I've done I check out with Grand Lodge. Did you have a problem with this? They said no, and I said okay, but you know, guys with medals all over the place, and they say no, you can't do that. Yeah.
That's funny. It sounds very familiar. I think we've heard that a couple of times too. Some of the things we tried to do.
Once or twice.
Yeah. Who are you and who authorized this?
Yes, Masonic police coming out. And that's the thing. I appreciate their intention. It just usually they need to work on their rhetoric, and how that comes across. Because I'm always game to be whispered good counsel. It just usually doesn't come off that way.
Don't you know who I am? Why didn't you come to me first?
Yeah. It's like, oh goodness.
Well, and to be honest, I don't think we encountered that near as much as well-intentioned brothers who just didn't know and they weren't aware about it, and kind of challenging of, well, who from the Grand Lodge has authorized this, because I want to make sure it's on the up and up before I even consider being a part of it.
We're also scared of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite is the brethren who are trying to express their influence or express some level of status by warning you. Oh, well, I just want to make sure you don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate the
In a
thought.
way, some of it may be, I heard actually from one brother who said that he had tried something similar and he had gotten his hands slapped years before, and that's why they issued that warning, was because they didn't want us to experience that same impact that they had upon
absolutely.
themselves.
And if it's something like that, absolutely. I will
That's what
all
I'm
day
talking
long,
about.
I will take lessons from the past and go, oh crap, like you tried this and it didn't go well, so maybe we should tread cautiously. Absolutely. All day, every day. Those are great lessons to have, but they're not always that way, A lot of times it's just somebody going, oh, I don't know. Are you
Well, and
sure you're fine?
I'm I'm willing to bet that person told you that in person, probably, Billy, or at
Yeah.
least in a private manner,
Right. Yeah.
whispering good counsel, to where it's not like a social media blast or something like that, to where it's calling you out in front of God and country.
Yeah.
I just had a great conversation with Bruce Hammond, who reminded me about something that an older past master of my lodge is not active. There was a brother that stood up in lodge. Somebody had did something that wasn't correct, and he said, "Brother, you're wrong." And Bruce Hammond popped up. He said, "You don't tell another Mason they're wrong. You say, that's not the way I have it."
Right.
So there's proper ways to do things. Although the guy was right that he was wrong, there's there's a better way to do that. We're brothers.
Right.
Right.
And
Called etiquette.
yeah, and it's the same thing with calling somebody out, because if you're genuinely concerned and you have a reason to be, I want to know, because the last thing I want to do is get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and my approach with it is kind of like, hey, have you checked out this aspect, and this aspect? Yes. Okay. Cool. All right. It just pulled up some yellow and red flags for me, and I was kind of concerned. If everything checks out, then awesome. I'm gonna support you in this. But if you haven't done that and you're gonna do it anyway, then you're an idiot.
You got some trouble.
There's a certain level to this. Like, hey, I've whispered good counsel to you, but if you go and do this anyway, I'm gonna reserve the right to call you stupid.
No, and that's why it's important to come with articles. I mean, if they're doing something that's not proper, hey, have you seen this article in the law book? This is the way I'm interpreting it.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's good ways to do that, and that's important because it's so crucial. If you've stepped in Dookie and you know where it is, let your brother know.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I got spanked for this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, and going back to that, to the brother who had tried something at one point and he was shot down, the same circumstances don't exist in perpetuity, right? I mean, a good idea is a good idea. It's like, oh, so the leadership this year in my lodge or grand lodge or whatever, they're totally not into it, but there's always next year, and I can bring it up again.
Try again.
Okay, well, and so Michael, if you don't mind, we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your publishing company. And so when and how did you get the inspiration to start Cornerstone Publishers?
Well, one of the things that used to frustrate me to no end is when I would see book lists, recommended book lists, and every second or third book that was listed was not in print. And so I was very frustrated. I would, I have to go try. Well, we didn't have online back then, or much of online. So I had to go root through used bookstores, and a lot of times you just couldn't find the books. And so I initially started to try and do quality reprints of older books, and that was what I initially started. Initially, I also would scour out used bookstores, and when I first started the website, I would also sell used books, and that was a big thing. But that got to be too much of a problem with inventory, and they wanted to know what I had as inventory, and it was more of a problem. So I ended up just doing books. But that's what started. That was in 1995. We started that.
Oh wow! I didn't realize it was that long ago.
Yes, it's been a while, and it's evolved, and it's grown, and I'm proud of it. It's not just Masonic books. We do esoteric books, Rosicrucian, a lot of different fiction books.
Camping books on there. I mean, really unique ones too. Not like modern day.
for a while I was doing Pulp Fiction, and it was heavyweight Pulp Fiction guys, and so it was any kind of little market that I can get into that because Masonic books by themselves, and it's not going to make a business.
Yes,
And
true.
I got into Kindle very early, and doing audio books and trying to do more of them, and just trying to do whatever we can to get the material.
So, if a brother wants to buy books from Cornerstone Publishers, where do they find you?
You can find the books all together on just do a Google search for Cornerstone Book Publishers or www.cornerstonepublishers.com, and
Awesome.
that'll take them there.
No,
And they also books are available on most of them are available on Amazon and different places like that. You can find them. I've seen them even on eBay. I've seen a lot of the books on eBay, but Cornerstone is where you get the complete section of them.
Gotcha.
So actually, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up actually to the original question, you had mentioned that on the reading list, some of them were out of print. So does your company reprint some of the older Masonic books?
Yes, even done Mackey's Encyclopedia. I try to get as many of the ones that are hard to get, and we've done like the Boston Ewer rituals. Did that, and try to get as many of the that are hard to find. And what we'll do is get them, and then we'll clean them up as best as possible, and try to republish them with nice covers, and everything has to be paperback because I tried one time doing hardback and I really lost my shirt. It's not a profit business. Knows that there's not money in this. I do it just to try to get this material out there and put food on the table, and that's pretty much about it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. What a valuable asset. Because you're right. Even those books. I mean, we were talking about it earlier. A book that I was inspired by as a young Mason, and now I can't find it anywhere, and it can get a little frustrating.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, when I wrote this question, what's your vision for the company? I didn't realize it'd been open since 1995. I mean, is there any place else you're looking to take it, or just keep
Well,
reprinting them?
I think there was a time where Kindle looked like it was going to overtake print books. And so I had gotten into Kindle very early on, and the various forms of ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly I started noticing that the Kindle books were losing steam. And I've recently started getting more and more requests for print books, but also, so I'm just trying to stay ahead of the curve. And I don't want to eliminate any one of these type of books. I've had some people say that they want to eliminate all print media and just simply go to electronic, and I think that's a serious mistake. And too many people simply want a book in their hand. So I'm trying to provide print books, electronic books for those who want them, and also audio books.
Yeah, that's something we were talking about beforehand too, to where if it's a book that I really want to absorb, I want it in my hand, and typically want a highlighter. Unless it's something really old, I don't want to mark up. I want to have it in my hand. But if it's a book that I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that, I want to hear what they have to say, I'll audio book it all day. But the retention rate between the two is not the same. I don't care how you listen to it, even if you're meditating, whatever. It's not the same as if you actually read it in your hands.
And I was going to say, I work for an architecture firm. I'm a plumbing designer. I spend all day looking at a screen, drawing on the screen, making calculations on the screen. Anytime that I have a chance, I do everything on paper. including books, because I spend all day looking at a screen for my job. Most younger Masons are going to have some form of job that involves them looking at a screen for a long time. Even if they work out in the field a lot, they're going to have to, there's a lot of jobs where even if you're a contractor, you're going to end up doing a lot of input into a screen of some kind, right? It gets old. There's something very valuable about print media. So pretty much the only time that I buy stuff on Kindle is if I can't find it in print. There was a book that went on sale recently for Kindle format, and it was all the old rituals in England, some of which were many of which were prior to the formation of the United Grand Lodge, and it had like the oldest Templar rituals and stuff, and it had Masonic catechisms and stuff, and it had history, but it was out of print because the publishers had said that if they'd made a print copy, each one would have been several $100s, And as somebody who has been finished with college for a while, I'm not interested in paying several $100s for a book anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
It's like the reason Baskin Robbins has so many different flavors of ice cream is everybody has their own likes and dislikes. And you got to give everybody, to stay in business, you got to each like, and everyone doesn't like the same thing. So you have to try to accommodate as many as you can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you publish new authors as well?
I do sometimes, but there's a problem because it's the business does not. We don't sell a whole lot of books, and a lot of times someone feels that if they go publishing a book, they're gonna make a ton of money. And I try to tell each author, you're not gonna do this for money. You got to do it for labor of love. Unfortunately, some of them, well, how come I'm not getting more money from this? And it's very depressing at times. And I said, well, I'm the publisher. I eat peanut butter, So it's an interesting twist. So yes, I do, but not as many because I'm trying to get material out there, and it's more difficult business than people realize. People have ideas about it that just is not reality.
Yeah, so you're a book publisher, not a book publicist.
Well, I do what I can.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So when they publish a book, when you publish a book for someone, I mean, are you just doing that part? Or are you editing it, or how does that process?
It depends on. We do editing, and it's a family job.
Gotcha.
Really, we all work on it, and it's very rewarding, and it satisfies a creative outlet. We spend a lot of time on covers because I believe covers are important, and so we spend time on that, and just try to get it. Now, some of them, if they're photographic reproductions, the most you can't really edit the text, but you can clean up splotches as best you can and things like that. We try to make the books as appealing as possible.
If a lodge was looking to start or expand their existing lodge or library, do you offer any kind of special for bulk purchases?
Absolutely. In fact, every year the Grand Lodge of Texas buys a bunch of books to resell. We give a special discount for any lodges or groups that want to raise money, and we have actually there's a number of lodges and Masonic book clubs that have started, and they will get books to not only to discuss, raise money for their little groups, so they'll buy at discount and sell at retail, and they make the profit off of that. And we get Scottish Rite Valleys doing that. I have a whole Scottish Rite books. So yes, most certainly we do, and all anyone has to do is go to the website and shoot me an email, and we can set them up with discounts.
So the New Orleans Scottish Rite College has educational videos for sale for lodges and for other bodies. Could you give us a synopsis of their content and how to get them?
Well, unfortunately, right now we're in a process where we're redoing a lot of the videos. They were on CDs, and we're trying to get a lot of the newer ones done. And so we're in the process and selling these in the same way. And what we've had is valleys or lodges. They'll do educational programs, and they'll just, instead of bringing someone in, they'll show one of the videos. And we have a variety of times. You might have some of them that are 10 minutes long, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever time they want to allot for a lecture. They can get these videos and just use them for their lodge lectures. And so it works out. But again, we're in the process right this minute. We're not selling them, or they're not available, of reestablishing them and redoing them for ease of use.
Do you have an ETA on when they would be available? Because that sounds interesting.
Probably uh, about 4 weeks. I think we'll be having something, a whole new section set up. But and the reason was we had several of them out there, but then we had a whole number of videos that were done that were not on there, and people were saying, "Well, how come this was off?" And we're trying to upgrade a lot of the equipment and the quality of the videos that we're doing.
Yeah.
So another month we should have that up, and they can get that, and then they can have educational programs for. Usually, each one of the CDs has about 6 to 10 videos on it. Maybe a little more. I have to go back and look, but it's a number of programs that they can have just with one of these discs.
That's a genius idea. I mean, I'm thinking about lodges that don't necessarily have the resources, whether it's money or the brothers capable of, doing something like that, in the quality that it needs to be done. Plug this CD and, get rocking and rolling. That is
Yep.
a great idea. I look forward to that. We're going to have to get that, guys. No doubt.
So at this time, I'd like to offer our fraternal quote of the week, which is either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. And that's by Right Worshipful Brother Benjamin Franklin, past Grand Master of Pennsylvania.
That's very fitting.
Yep, it really is. So, guys, we'll do our closing thoughts. We'll do Rhit, Billy, myself, and then after I'm done, we'll have Michael give his closing thoughts.
So for me, even though if you've never met Michael and you listen to this podcast, you might think he wears a Superman Masonic cape, but he's just a guy just like us. And the effect that he's had on the craft by just diligently working and following his passion. I mean, that's if more brothers did that, you know, these things that we seem to focus on and call problems and troubles, those things just melt away. So I encourage everybody, not everybody's going to be a publisher for sure, but there's a niche for you. Get after it. This is a diverse craft.
So I love this story about how, Michael, you saw a niche and you didn't wait for someone else. You decided to take action on it. I think it goes a lot with the conversation we had last time with Right Worshipful Underwood. It's if you see something that needs to be done, do it. Don't wait for someone else. And and that's fantastic that in '95 you saw this, and beyond, right? I mean, because you've been doing the work within your own jurisdiction for so long. So it's inspiring, and thank you. And also, I look forward to hearing you talk again because last year at MasoniCon, that was a very great tale that you told in a way that, it came together at the end and was very poignant, I guess, on, helping us realize these connections that those events had with Texas Masonry.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I was going to say the first time that we met in person was the dinner right before MasoniCon, and then hearing you talk at MasoniCon itself was actually fascinating. And I told my at the time fiance about it. I said, "Hey, yeah, like we had this guy from New Orleans that came, and we asked him if he needed set up for slides or anything, and he just kind of extemporaneously gave this 35-minute talk on like how critical Masons were in the Battle of New Orleans, and she was just blown away by the description, and I was absolutely enraptured by the talk, and just it was so cool to see Masonic education in the flesh, basically. Also, I got a great souvenir out of that, which was when we handed you the little souvenir or award, shall we say, kind of as a thank you. And I handed you the thing, and it's the most awkward photo of me that has ever existed because you look fine in it, but for some reason my body language is completely contorted and I'm not looking at the camera at all. And so it's just a wonderful photo of a great day. And I'm just like, well, it's proof that I can never be cool. Uh, but then again,
I wouldn't say that.
well, and I was gonna say, when my wife saw that, she said, "Oh, well, honey, you're a Mason. None of you guys are cool." So,
That's why we all
but
hang out.
it was a really wonderful experience to kind of have you in the leading charge of this educational effort that we're doing here in Texas, and it uh, having your support and your advice and just even having you on this podcast is just very encouraging for the efforts that we are trying to do, whether it's through MasoniCon or through the podcast or through even just regular conversation with other brethren. It's really a treasure to get to be able to lean on you. So
Yeah.
thank you, Michael. If you have any closing thoughts for our listeners, please go for it.
I appreciate it. But I'll say one thing. I was going to say something else, but I've got to mention something and explain something that you mentioned about when I give a talk. I do not talk off the cuff by any means. And there's a reason, and a lot of people don't realize this. I have dyslexia. And
Mm.
for me to hold a piece of paper up and read it is horrible.
Very
And
dangerous.
so
Yeah.
what I have to do is memorize these talks. So any time you see me giving a talk somewhere, I have to write the script in my head. I get up in the morning and I'll pace my living room and the kitchen, and I'll write the talk in my head from
Oh,
memory.
wow.
There's no way. The confusion happens when someone will hear me give a talk, and then a couple of months later, I'll be at a lodge. They'll see me and they say, "Oh, well, could you stand up and say a few words? We heard you just talking off the cuff, you know." And such, and I don't do that. I can't do that.
So then my
And I
apologies.
said, no, not at all. But I want to explain that there's a process, and the thing about it is it gives the message I'm trying to give is people can do whatever they want to do, and if it's a little harder for them, they can just simply do it anyway. And no matter what you do, there's going to be people who don't realize what's going on, and they may not understand certain things, but you just keep doing what you're doing, and eventually it's going to get through. That's my advice to anyone coming up in masonry or anyone in life.
Well, fantastic. Folks, please remember, visit Cornerstone Publishers. Is it .net, Michael, or is it .com?
.com.
Please visit cornerstonepublishers.com. And also, please remember to subscribe to the New Orleans Scottish Rite College YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about the podcast or about our lodge, we are fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you're interested in visiting our lodge or in becoming a Mason, please email us at that email. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, please reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org, numeral 6, numeral 4. You can learn more about our educational event, Texas MasoniCon 2019, at www.texasmasonicon.com. That's texasmasonicon.com. We are at Texas MasoniCon on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I believe that my dates are outdated. I was going to say it's on September 15th, but that's not correct at all.
Yeah, no.
Rhit, when are we actually doing Texas MasoniCon 2019?
It's July 27th.
It's on July
Saturday.
27th on a Saturday, all day.
Yeah.
So go to TexasMasonicon.com, buy your tickets. We still have a pre-purchase price. I think, are we still running the early bird special?
Yeah, $55.
Yeah. So the early bird special may run out by the time that this podcast air. I don't know. It just depends on how many tickets have sold at this point.
Yeah, tickets are selling.
So,
Actually, and we didn't do this before, but we can now announce who our headline speaker is.
yes.
True this. Take the reins, Billy.
Okay, yeah. So we have lined up for our Texas MasoniCon 2019, Brother S. Brent Morris, who, if you're involved in Scottish Rite, you should know who he is. And if you're not involved in Scottish Rite but still a Mason, you should still know who he is. So we have a lot of fantastic speakers. Brother Joseph Wages. I'm drawing a blank right now, actually, because it's like
Kevin Main. Yeah, there's Joseph Wages, Kevin Main, Paul Reyna, John Tolbert, Right Worshipful Jim Rumsey, and S. Brent Morris.
Yep.
It's the keynote. So it's going to be jammed packed.
It's going to be awesome. I'm super psyched.
A full day of Masonic.
I can tell you that's one of the best experiences I've seen.
Like I said, folks, www.fortworth148.org, www.texasmasonicon.com, and www.cornerstonepublishers.com.
All righty, gentlemen. This has been a good one. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabe Jagush signing off.
Michael Paul, good night.